Carla Spataro is the director of the MFA in Creative Writing program at Rosemont College. She is also the editorial director and co-publisher of Philadelphia Stories magazine and PS Books. She is a Pennsylvania Council on the Arts Fellowship winner for fiction. Her short stories can be read in a number of literary journals, including Painted Bride Quarterly, Wild River Review, X-Connect, The Baltimore Review, Mason's Road, and 4 foot 33 inches, an online audio journal based in London. Nominated for a Million Writers South Award, she was also twice named a finalist in the Philadelphia City Paper Fiction Contest and was a finalist in the Mason's Road Contest.
You speak a little louder.
Let's welcome
Thanks, Tori. My bio is irrelevant, thanks. But I appreciate it. I didn't have to do it myself. So. Thanks, you guys, for coming. We have a ton of things going on, which I will get to at some point, I promise. Go over the events. I'm really happy and slightly nervous to be reading for you tonight, now that my role here has changed a little bit. So anyway, I'm going to read actually from an older story, and I'm going to I can't read the whole thing, it's too long, but I'm going to read the second half of the story and kind of fill you in a little bit if I can. The narrator's name is Lori. She is best friends with two characters, one named Jerry Bentmeyer, and his nickname is Bent, and his wife, her name is Bluebell, and everybody calls her Blue. Mike E. is Lori's boyfriend. Lori's dad, like Lori again is the narrator, is a deputy sheriff. The story takes place in West Michigan, which is where I grew up. These characters were all friends from school and have stayed friends. Bent and Blue, as they're known in the story, got married very young and have too many kids. And Bent is struggling with mental illness issues, and it all sort of comes to a head on his birthday. So the story takes up, they've planned this like elaborate dinner for him, and he hasn't showed up. And Lori and her boyfriend Mike are out looking for him. The wind was whipping up off the lake, and it felt like we might get one of them freak April snowstorms. I pulled my coat tighter around me, wishing I had my ski hat and gloves. Mike grabbed his flashlight from the trunk and set out across the dune. It didn't take us long to find Bent. He was standing at the top of the dune, his arms spread wide, his shirt, shoes, pants, and coat were piled in a heap at his feet. His hair was loose and swirled around his head like octopus tentacles. I ain't ashamed to say I was scared. Even in the dark, we could see that Bent had cut himself, and there was blood trickling down his bare arms and chest. Mike was scared too. I could tell. Bent was talking to himself. We couldn't really understand what he was saying. I grabbed onto Mike's hand, which he squeezed tight. Bent, honey, it's me, Lori. We stopped a good few yards away from him. My voice felt tiny in the wind coming off the lake. Bent, it's Lori. Why don't you let us drive you home? He turned his head, and in the moonlight, I could see that he was gone. Whatever had been left of Bent was now in a very faraway place. Mike backed us up a few paces. Lori, you need to go call your dad. Tell him we need some help. I can't leave you here. I'll be fine. Bent turned away from us now and was staring back out at the water. His mumble was turning into a growl. Mike shoved his keys into my hand. Just go, he said, pushing me a little harder than he intended, I think. And I slid backward down the sand. My stomach felt like it was in my throat, and I ran to the car. I had to go all the way back to Whitehall before I found a phone. By the time I got my dad on the line, I was crying pretty good. It's Bent, I said. Dad, he's gone completely crazy. Me and Mike are out by Duck Lake, and he's cut himself. I couldn't finish. My dad took over. Being a cop, he knew exactly what to do. By the time I got back to the lake, there were cops from the county, the township, and the state police all over the place. I waited by the side of the road and tried not to think about Mike being all alone out there with Bent. It wasn't right, none of it. I took 4 cops plus Mike to wrestle Bent to the ground and to get the knife out of his hands. My dad put his arm around me as the state troopers drove Bent handcuffed at the wrists and ankles to the hospital. I seen this a couple times, my dad said to me. I ain't no doctor, but it looks like schizophrenia to me. Well, my dad was right. Paranoid schizophrenia with delusions of grandeur. Sounded to me like an English teacher I had in high school. But Blue never did appreciate that joke too much, but I had to try and cheer her up somehow. I used to drive her to the state mental hospital in Traverse City where they had Ben locked up. He was real bad off. It took almost 4 hours to get there, so we didn't go too much at first. Ben didn't even recognize his own parents for a long time, but the doctors kept telling Blue that he would get better once the medication had a chance to take hold. Turns out Blue was waiting to tell Ben about another baby the night he went off the deep end. She never did tell him, only me, and that's because she wanted me to drive her to an abortion clinic in Grand Rapids. Said it was a birthday present she just couldn't afford to give him right now. I think Mrs. Bettmeyer knew what was going on, but she didn't say nothing to Blue or me about it. She came over and made cookies with her grandkids while Blue and me were at the clinic. I don't know what was scarier, the silent trip home from GR with Blue crying in the front seat of my car, or seeing Ben all doped up like a zombie in a straitjacket. Life sure seemed to be taking a turn for the worse. Ben was in the hospital for almost a year before they let him out. While he was away, me and Mike E. decided to get married. I dated a few other guys, but none of them was near as nice as Mike. They made me a head cashier at Myers, and me and Mike bought a little house not too far from my folks in Twin Lake. Blue went back to work at the Myers, and Mrs. Bettmeyer watched the kids during the day. Ben wasn't really the same when he come home. He was tired all the time, he slept a lot. The doctor said he was doing real good, but it didn't seem like it to me or Blue. He didn't want to play with the kids or go fishing or even draw anymore. Every time I went over to their house, he was just sitting in the living room in his bathrobe, watching TV and drinking beer, which I'm sure he wasn't supposed to be doing anyway. I felt sorry for him, and Blue too, of course. She was working harder than she ever thought she'd have to, but what else could she do? Ben's disability checks would only go so far. Sometimes I would sit and talk to Ben about art and stuff when Blue was in the kitchen or with the kids. I was taking a class at the community college, and I could see how much talent Ben really had. But at that time, he didn't seem too interested. Blue got plenty frustrated with him too, the way he sat around all day doing nothing. Everyone told her she should be patient, and the doctors told her he would get better. And he did, or so it seemed. After a while, he seemed to perk up some, not be so moody. Him and Mike went out on Mike's boat once or twice. They even took the kids and told everyone they had a grand time. Blue started getting that dreamy look in her eye again, and I told her she better not be thinking about having any more kids. It had been about 18 months since Ben had his breakdown when he decided he wanted to go back to work. None of us was quite sure that was the right thing, but his dad got him a part-time shift on the smelter, which seemed to suit everybody just fine. Maybe it was all them chemicals that messed him up in the end, or maybe it was just the heat. I guess nobody will ever really know for sure. He just seemed to be doing so much better that it came as a real shock when Blue found him in the bathroom one night after work. She knew right where to go because she could hear Amber wailing the minute she walked in the door. Leastways, that's what she told me. The TV was on, and so was every light in the house. Up in the bathroom, Ben had lit every candle he could find. JJ and Tiffany were sitting on the edge of the tub in their underpants, their little hands tied behind their backs, sniffling. Amber was sitting on the toilet lid. Her hands were tied too. Bet had shaved all their beautiful little heads. Amber's head was nicked and bleeding. That's why she was crying so hard, I guess. He'd shaved JJ's eyebrows too. Blue freaked. Bet kept saying the kids needed to be purified, first by water and then by fire. They wouldn't be saved. Blue called the cops and had him arrested. Turns out Bet seemed to be so much better because he'd stopped taking his medicine. Well, he seemed better until he snapped, that is. I don't mean to be flip, but I don't know how else to put it. They locked him up in the psych ward at the county hospital this time and forced the medication on him. Blue begged me to go with him to see her. Blue begged me to go with her to see him for moral support. I hated seeing him like that, but I had to be there for Blue. She was my best friend. Bet was locked in a ward, and when they brought him in to see me and Blue, it looked to me like he'd been crying. He had on a floppy hospital gown and a dingy bathrobe. His feet must have been freezing because all he had on was them flip-flops. He sat down across from us and stared hard at Blue. It was a long time before anybody said anything. Blue, I'm real sorry I didn't hurt the kids, did I? He did look sorry, I thought, but I knew Blue had made up her mind. It don't matter, Jerry. Blue had her hands in her lap. I don't think she could quite bring herself to look it back fully in the eye. What do you mean it don't matter? He leaned forward a little. His neck was red. It means you can't come home, she said, shaking her head. I made up my mind. Well, don't I get a say? It's my house, too, he said, standing up. The orderly came over and placed his hand on Ben's shoulder, and he sat back down. That's true. If you want me and the kids to move out, we'll find a place, but we're done. Ben's head swiveled in my direction. You put her up to this, didn't you, Lori? Me? I sat back in my chair a little. Nobody can put Blue up to anything. You ought to know that by now. Bent. Don't call me that. He put his head down and pounded his fist on the table. Don't call me that. Don't call me that. Blue and I both shoved our chairs back at the same time. We were so startled. You're going to have to settle down, Mr. Bettmeyer, or your visit will be over. Ben's eyes were red and kind of bulging out of his head a little, like he was trying not to cry. I didn't want to upset him. I was sorry, and I said so. He sat up straight and nodded to the orderly. Me and Blue kind of relaxed a little, but we were scared. Sorry and scared. I'll call you Jerry if you want me to, I said finally. It's the damn medicine. It makes me so groggy. I can't draw. I can't do nothing. I feel like I got a wet bag of leaves over my head. Me and Blue looked at him, not knowing what to say. Why can't I just be normal again? Blue shook her head and reached for my hand. I could tell she wanted to cry real bad, but she was trying to hold it together for Ben. Ben wasn't in the hospital for too long this time. They got him back on his pills and they let him out. While he was away, Blue had filed for divorce and sole custody of the kids. Mr. and Mrs. Bettmeyer understood, but they wasn't too happy about the whole situation. Ben had moved into their basement and could only see the kids when he was at his parents' house. The kids really was afraid of him at first, which is totally understandable under the circumstances. I was a little afraid of him too. Ben's mom refused to believe that anything was really wrong with him. She cooked his meals and pampered him like he was a little kid. She would have made his bed and dusted his room too, except that Ben went out and got a padlock for the door, saying a man had a right to his privacy. She acted like the whole problem was with Blue, that Blue had never been a good wife, that Blue had never been good for Ben at all. That may have been true. I thought once or twice, in my secret heart, that maybe Blue wasn't no good for Ben, that maybe she held him back by having all them kids. He never really had a chance to find his true self. But if I'm honest, I know that ain't totally right. It wasn't Blue's fault. Ben got sick and shaved his kids' heads. Things seemed to settle down for a while. Blue started seeing Mikey's cousin Fred, a real cute college boy from Grand Haven. Ben would call her once in a while in the middle of the night, she said, and then hang up. Mike said he was still working at the foundry, but only part-time, and that everybody there kind of kept their distance, even though Ben's dad was the foreman. I thought about Ben a lot in those days, but I never did go see him. I'm not really sure why. It was around Christmas time when Fred said he wanted to take Blue skiing up at Boyne. Blue asked me to watch the kids for her, but Ben's mom wanted to take them for the holiday. Mrs. Bettmeyer didn't much approve of Fred and Blue, or of me, even though I was finally expecting my first one later that year. Blue was a little nervous about leaving the kids overnight, but she trusted Mr. and Mrs. Bettmeyer. She knew they loved their grandkids, even if they had no use for her anymore. Blue kissed them kids goodbye on a snowy morning the day after Christmas and left with Fred to go skiing. How it all really happened, I don't think we'll ever really know for sure. Turns out Ben had been flushing his pills down the toilet, and not even his mother knew it. You can't look at that woman now, I'll tell you what. She aged 20 years in a day. Can't look nobody in the eye when she passes them on the street. Seems Ben told his parents that he needed to go out for a bit, pick up some stuff at the grocery, maybe get a few supplies at the new art store down in Muskegon. Ben's dad didn't think nothing of it. Ben spent a lot of time drawing during his breaks at work. They all thought it was therapeutic. His parents swear up and down that he was fine when he left the house, but I don't believe them. I don't believe them one bit. It had been quite a while since the hair shaving incident, and the kids, like kids do, had forgotten all about it. Mrs. Bettmeyer had them all wound up on Christmas candy and cookies, and Amber, as usual, was sick. Tiffany and JJ decided they wanted to go for a ride with their dad, and for some reason, everybody thought that would be okay. Ben strapped them into the back seat of his dad's Ford and drove to the foundry. Mike was working that day with the skeleton crew because of the holidays and all. They was mostly just cleaning up, working in the front of the foundry. Mike didn't think nothing was wrong, didn't hear Ben or the kids come in the side door until they heard the motor on the swing arm to the smelter fire up. As soon as they heard that, they dropped what they was doing, which Mike don't even remember now, and ran to the smelting room. Mike and his crew found Ben staring into the furnace flames with that same faraway look on his face he had that night on the dune. The children have been purified by fire, Ben said. Mike told me he was smiling and crying at the same time. They are safe, nothing can hurt them now, not even me. No one ever thought in a million years that Bent would ever really hurt his kids, medication or not, but it seems we was all wrong about everything. Bent had put his kids in the smelter and turned the furnace on. It was all over for them in less than 30 seconds. They had to do tests on the ash in the bowl to prove what he'd done, that he hadn't stashed them someplace or done something else. The whole county was sick about it. Mike couldn't go back to work. He felt responsible, like he could have stopped Bent from doing it, but we all know that ain't true. It's too bad Bent didn't burn himself up. I mean, it's mean to say something like that, I know, but everybody would have been a lot better off, especially his kids. My dad told me that when the police searched Bent's room in his parents' house, that they painted some kind of fantastical mural on the walls. Giant red flames rose from the floor to the ceiling, and according to my dad, intertwined in them flames was all kinds of stuff you could see in pictures that they printed in the paper. There were skeletons and ghosts and saints and all kinds of animals. Dad said if the whole thing hadn't been so sickening, the mural might have almost been beautiful. Bent was never the same. Or Blue, I'm sorry, Blue was never the same. The only time she lets Amber out of her sight is when the kid's at school, when the kid is at school, and even then she picks her up and drops her off every day. I don't really blame her. I hold on to my little one a little tighter than I should probably, but I can't help myself. Michigan don't have the death penalty, but plenty of folks around here sure thought they should have made an exception for Bent. He knew he was dangerous when he didn't take his pills, but he did it anyway. In the eyes of the law, that makes him responsible, and I have to say that I agree. Mike got a job working in a lumber yard as a manager. Doesn't pay as good as the foundry, but he likes being outside, he says, and away from the smelter. Our kid's about 3 years old now, and he loves to draw. Mike don't much care for that and hates it when I put the pictures up on the fridge, but I do it anyway. I love Mike and I love our kid. When Mike ain't home, I get out the pastels and paper that Blue gave me after Bent went to prison, and me and Mikey Jr. sit on the floor and draw and draw and draw.